You're now listening to Blerdkast, presented to you by Blerdography. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Blerdkast. I've never started my podcast that way, but here we are, and I have probably, I want to say, the most interesting person to interview in front of me today, because this person is responsible for Blerdkast. So I want to just welcome to the show for the first time, and hopefully not the last time, Jeff Haas, or Haas. Is it Haas? Because I know I've said your name before and I probably messed it up.
Haas.
Haas. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for coming on. We have known each other for a little over a year now by doing this podcasting and interview thing. You have created a business or a business model per se where you network podcasters and other nerds to say comic book creators and comic book writers and artists. And that's how we got acquainted through some Facebook groups, I believe. Because of you, I've been able to grow my podcast. I've been able to interview so many talented people through Blerdkast and talk about their comics alone. I just did one last week with I can't remember his name, but it was
Caleb Palmquist.
Yeah, there you go. Yep, there you go.
Yes.
I've met so many interesting people through this business model you have created or you are running, whatever it is. I never bothered to ask. You just showed up and was like, hey, you want to interview this person? You got this amount of time to do it, and the interview got to be up by this day. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And we just kept doing it. And here we are. So let's talk about it. Where did this all begin? And I know you got comics. We're going to talk about the comic stuff, but we got to get this out of the way first.
Long story short, about 5 years ago, I was the public relations manager for a podcast that I'm no longer part of. And a few people who worked on the podcast had their other ventures. Like I have my own venture. They were authors and comic book writers themselves. And they were like, well, since you're good at getting guests for the show, you'd probably be good at getting people on other people's shows. And I was like, well, sure. And so they offered to pay me. And I started doing the job of finding people's podcasts. And then word of mouth spread to other people as they found they liked what they saw. And it just kept spreading and spreading and spreading. And now I've been doing it now for, maybe 3.5 years now, maybe something like that, with different podcasts. And nice thing is word of mouth. I don't ever advertise myself. And it's just people who talk to other people who are like, hey, can you do me too? I'm like, okay. And now I have a client, Michael Patrick Rogers, who's doing indie horror films. And I'm looking to book him too. So you'll hear from me probably shortly for him.
That is awesome. I feel like I should be paying you for helping me book these gigs. So
I'll be happy to take money anytime.
But that's so great that you did that. But it is unfortunate that you left the podcast show that you started doing this with, but great that you just turned it into a venture of your own. Aside from that, how did you get into comic creation? I know we're going to jump into that whole road, but I just want to get that into
No worries. But I will plug, even though I quit that old podcast, I do have a current one called Traversing the Stars, which I'm sure you know about as well. And I do, I post usually twice a week, new interviews. So people go on YouTube, subscribe. I need to get to my 1,000 subscribers to start getting money for it. So please subscribe. But anyways, how to get into comic books. I'm a lifelong comic book nerd. I'm a second generation comic book nerd. My father was a comic book nerd growing up. And when I hit around 8 or 9, old enough to want to read a comic book, he bought me my first comic books. And then it became kind of like my bloodstream. Around in my mid to late 20s, there was a comic book company that people may or may not know who are old called CrossGen Comic Books. And CrossGen had a opening for new writers. They were the only companies at all that was accepting scripts without an artist attached. And in the world of comic book companies, that's unheard of. Almost no company in the entire comic book in the entire country will take a script without an artist attached to it. And CrossGen was. So I started writing this really cool script. At least I thought it was cool. And I got it finished. And I was right around to publish it when they announced they were going out of business. So I decided I can tweak it and make it my own comic book. And I made a graphic novel out of it. Cool cover by Charlie Adler. It was called Sanctus. And then I decided to keep on working on comic books. I did Nightmare Patrol. I did some other comic books for Crystal Fractals. I did Malik Running Devil, and I just kept on trying to knock them out.
Okay, that's dope. That's really dope. We're gonna dive more into all that, but first, thank you for just again coming on to the show. But I like to now in this season of blerdkast ask everybody before we get into the nitty gritty of the interview questions. What have you been geeking out to recently?
In the world of comic books. Um,
No, just in general.
let's see. In general, I guess I am going to end up back in the world of comic books. What I've really found that I've loved a lot is Vengeance of Moon Knight by Jed McKay.
Mm.
Great comic book. Gargoyles from Dynamite is freaking crazy good. The Hulk by Philip Kennedy Johnson is really good. So I've been loving that a lot. And I've been watching reruns of Star Trek Voyager. I've been binging that for a while on Paramount Plus. So that's been something I've been geeking out on. And I've been trying to get to the Godzilla X Kong movie, but I have not been able to get my butt into the theater yet, but I'm trying hard to.
That's also something that's on my bucket list to try to cross off, but it's hard. It is hard as an adult trying to just enjoy yourself and enjoy the stuff that we all collectively geek out over. I get it. I get it. You're familiar with the Kong X Godzilla series, right? So I wanted to ask
Oh,
you
yes.
what are some of your opinions about that franchise so far?
I will say uneven. Skull Island is one of the best movies of the genre I think that was ever made. I love it to death. Godzilla King of the Monsters was definitely a movie. I remember seeing it. I watched it with my own eyes, but there it goes. Godzilla versus Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kong. Stupid fun. I think anytime you put those two monsters, you have them fight each other. And not every movie has to be literally good from a literary standpoint. It doesn't have to be a work of art. Sometimes it's just two big things smacking each other, and it's fun for 2 hours, and that's what that was. I don't think it was a work of art by any stretch, but I don't think I care. It was entertaining. And then I think the other Godzilla movie, I kind of remember he was fighting other things, and I know something about it. I can't remember much about that movie, so apparently it wasn't good enough to be memorable. But the franchise being a whole, let's face it, it's basically big monsters hitting each other, and they made 5 movies out of it.
I kind of I don't want to put this negative energy in the air about it, but it feels like the new Transformers Michael Bay movie to me, where of course I'm gonna love watching it. You got Transformers, big giant robots, and explosions. What else do I want? Now you got Godzilla and King Kong, two creatures who have nothing to do with each other and shouldn't have nothing to do with each other. But it's big stupid fun because I was that kid that played with the toys in the bathtub on the boat, and then you made a movie about it, and I was like, I don't care how stupid this looks. I love every second of this. So, yes, I
I
am
mean,
very much enjoying this franchise.
as long as I can watch something and at least acknowledge that there's a sapling of logic in the film, I'm okay with it. For the Bay Transformer movies, I love the first one, enjoyed the second one, the third one was fine. I don't remember what happened in the fourth, fifth, and I don't think I've ever watched the last Beast Wars one. But at the very least, the first couple had a good personality to a good story.
Right.
And I kind of feel like, as long as you don't completely lose the story thread, I'm totally happy with it. And Kong and Godzilla had enough of an excuse and enough of a story thread that I could ignore the parts that don't make any sense. Like how did Godzilla like scream through a tunnel halfway across the earth and see each other with Kong on the other side? I was like, that's mathematically, you just vision doesn't work that way, but who cares? It's fun. It was a cool scene.
Right. Right. Cool scene. That's all you want. That's all you want to see. Hollywood is really good at what it does, and that's making sure it gets every single dollar out of us people through nostalgia. But anyway, that's just my digression on it. So let's get into the interview. Let's get into the
Okay.
nitty-gritty. Let's get to know Jeff. Jeff, let's start by asking, where did it all begin for you? What is your nerdy origin story?
Oh god, my nerdy origin story was I was born on a cold day in January 6th. Um, it started back. No, like I said, for far as I know, I'm genetically a nerd. Is my understanding of things. My dad loves Star Trek. I like Star Trek. My dad loves geeky classic literature. I teach classic literature as a teacher. He loves comic books. I'm now obsessed with, and I've been buying them for way too long. It's been in my life. Like what started it, I don't remember. The only thing I remember as like that one image in my head, and there's an issue of Justice League of America. I think it was 213, where Red Tornado is flying towards a helicopter, and it's just that one panel. For some reason, that panel captured my imagination for years and years and years. And eventually got it signed by Jerry Conway. He signed the comic book for me, which is nice. But that something about that idea, that image, and then Firestorm was in that one as well. Something about those, just the image of all that. I got hooked. I think forever. It was something from like that point forward.
Okay. Okay.
So if you do a panel correctly, do a panel correctly, you can capture anyone. That one little box is a very powerful, is what I learned.
I agree. I don't know what it is about comics and just the countless stories you can just tell in that medium that is so captivating that I keep coming back to it. Like I don't understand. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of comic book art in a second, but I just wanted to point that out there. Like comics are just kind of the best medium for so many different platforms, or is a perfect platform to tell so many different stories. If you can find the right artist and people can put it together.
Because I think when comics are done well, especially at the scale that DC and Marvel can do them, is that when you develop a world that feels that immersive, it's like visiting old friends. Once a month, you get to visit your old friends, see what's going on in their lives, and you play in their little world for a little while. And that little escapism goes a long way in a very hard work day or school day, or in high school it would have been school day, but now it's a work day. And I think that's what comic books do. Every month you get to revisit. It's like a little portal into this world that you remember from a month ago, that you remember when you were 8 as well. And it's just this like visiting these old friends again. And I think that's what gets into your bloodstream, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's something about it that just keeps you coming back. Outside of nostalgia, it's something definitely outside of nostalgia. So you are a comic book writer, am
I
I
try to be.
correct? Yes.
I certainly
So
try to be.
you recently had a Kickstarter available for, hold on, let me pull it up again. The End of All Terminus #2. Let's
Yeah.
talk about it. Let's talk
Okay.
about your comic.
All right. Well, it's launches Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. There'll be a live show on my Instagram at 7:30. I urge everyone to go so I'm not embarrassed talking to myself. So please, everyone who's listening, join the show and sit there while I try to sound interesting for 30 minutes before I launch, and then obviously pledge. It's the second issue. The first issue launched last year. Was my first real Kickstarter that I did by myself, and I was proud to hit my number. Got a stretch goal in there as well, so I'm very proud of that. It's a sci-fi series that's been in my brain for a few years, and it's nice to see it. Anyone who does comic books of their own, when you finally get to hold your comic book and read it yourself, it's a hell of an experience. It's pretty damn cool, and I got to do that, and I love and I enjoyed the first issue a lot. I think some of the characters came out way more interesting than I even was planning them being. And then finally, the second issue. And it's cool to come out with a second one. So that's my goal, get the second one made. The third one issue is written, and I just want to see this happen and become real. And I'm trying to manifest it into the world by saying positive things about it. And it's up to everyone who's listening to actually make it happen, though.
That is dope. That is so dope. I'm sure there's some sort of sense of accomplishment you get when you get those first pages back of a fully completed funded book, and now you just gotta send out the work to the people who pledge. So that is very interesting. What is your favorite part about the comic book creation process?
The first time you unbox your first issue, and how well, it has become a little bit of a tradition for me now, because now I've published a few comic books, Mr. Claus as well, Santa Claus as well, a bunch of what becomes a tradition for me now is that I get the box, obviously rip it open, I read that issue one more time, then I put it in one of those nice hard cases, and I stick it on my wall of my books. I have a wall in my living room, which is just my books on the wall, all like with those like wall hangers. And every time I get a new one, I post up on that wall, and for a little while, it's cool. And that's my moment, is when it's that box, from that first box to putting it on my wall. That like 30-minute like window is my favorite window, because that's when it's like it's just when you feel the most confident in your ability and your life as a comic book writer, is that transition from opening then sticking on my wall as being one of my books.
I hate to ask this, because this might come off some kind of way, but do you sign your own books before you put them on the wall?
I do not.
Oh,
I
okay.
do not. I am vain, but I'm not that vain.
Okay. Okay.
I will say, when the ones that I ship, I do sign because
Okay.
even without asking. So that's a little bit of vanity that I'll sign the book before I ship it to a backer. But I don't sign mine. When I give them to family or friends, I don't sign. And apparently, when I send them to my artist, I forget to sign them because he was angry. He was like, you didn't sign the book you sent me. I was like, well, you're the artist. I didn't think that mattered. He's like, no, you signed the book. I was like, oh shit, sorry. I don't I, like I'm vain enough to post it on my wall on a vanity wall. I'm not so vain that I sign it. So
I don't
I'm
think there's nothing wrong with posting it on a vanity wall. Like, you mean, come on, if you do something cool, like this, you want to show it off at least to yourself, right?
exactly.
All right, so we talk about what is your favorite part of the comic book creation process. So you have this isn't your first time creating a comic book. So let's talk about your first time. 'Cause I had a really interesting last week asking that question. What is the difference between your first comic that you've made versus this one now, which I'm assuming is the most current one?
I will say not as much as I would like. On the one hand, I will say the first time book I made with a graphic novel, I said it's called Sanctus, which was one of the most stressful situations of my entire life. I lost so much money on artists who fell through and never completed work, which is a sort of thing a lot of writers do have. I think when I totaled the money that was just lost, that was never recouped because artists did work, then quit, or took the money and never completed any work, probably $8,000 to $9,000. That's a lot of money. My current project, I have an artist that I trust called Brad Ship. I'm confident that he'll do the work when he gets paid. We have a good relationship, which is a nice positive. But I will say the anxiety surrounding the creation of the comic book has never changed. I'm as nervous and anxious about this book as I was about my very first ever book. As far as, can I complete it? Will it be completed? Will it be any good? Will people want to read another issue of this? Will the artist come through? That anxiety always kind of stays there with me. I will say the fact that I have one that I have been able to trust has made it a better experience than the first one. But at the same time, if it was a different project and a different artist, it's not like there's so much change that, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But at the moment, I would say the major difference is at the moment, I have an artist that I trust. And as long as he's staying on board, I feel confident that he'll complete the pages and everything will go forward. But I will say that the nightmares of that first graphic novel have always stayed with me. And I've always had that nightmare of usually what happens is 5 or 6 pages in, they stop coming through after you paid them for the next few pages. And like I said, I went through 2 or 3 artists, and like I said, I think it was $8,000 or $9,000 just wasted in artists not coming through.
So let me ask you this. What has been the number one lesson you learned from your first comic book versus to this campaign that you're doing now?
Don't pay up front.
Yeah. Oh man. I almost said something I didn't want to say. Yeah, you should definitely not pay up front. But no, the importance of contracts and just
I will say I have not actually done the contracts yet, which I probably should have learned that by now, but unfortunately I haven't done that. But I will say I do attempt to go for people who are recommended by other people. Word of mouth is important. So any artist who does plan on screwing over their writer, keep in mind we all talk to each other, and eventually people are gonna stop coming to you for help, I mean for work. And I will also say that I say paying upfront. My rule has now become I'll pay you, for you do the first few pages, you get your pay, do the next few pages, I'll pay you again. And I do it that way now because I'm not losing money anymore that way. But like I said, that 8 to 9,000, that's kind of the hit that never escaped my memory. That there's that much money in a book that's just poof gone, you know?
I'm sure you have so many more horror stories, but maybe you can add that to your business model. You already connect comic book creators with podcasters. Maybe you can connect artists with writers.
That,
I
that
know
is
there's
that,
other services out there similar, but why not?
Yeah, there's something I started doing a little bit of when I spoke to some people who are looking to promote their comic book, and it's good. Like the difficulty is trust, and you got to make
Mm,
sure because once I can make the connection, I'm vouching for the artist now, and that's something that you do have to take very seriously because
mm,
it is money on the table, and as much as I always do believe 100% artists deserve their money, I 100%, everyone should be paid, everyone should be paid. And I wish I could pay my artist more than he gets paid for my pages. At the end of the day, though, the writer can also lose everything if it doesn't go well enough times. As far
Mm,
as I know a lot of writers who've done that. I paid for this artist, I felt they paid for this one, and you think, and it's like, well, they've lost how many thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's a unfortunately common story. I'm sure it is for the right artists as well who have done artwork and never been paid by their writer. I'm sure that's part of it as well. But unfortunately, I have my own bias to see from my own point of view. So my thing is, it's difficult to vouch for someone knowing that you're personally responsible for that person's responsibility. So I'm not 100% certain how comfortable I am doing that kind of stuff.
mm.
But if I find artists who are vouched for by other writers and are recommended, I would love to recommend them to others as well, because when you have an artist who is reliable, good at communication, good at the work itself, and just overall trustworthy and responsible, that's golden right there. Especially if they're doing it at a page rate that's indie friendly. I mean, if you're doing it for $1,000 a page, obviously I expect you to be all those things. But for unfortunately indie world of paying for an artist is usually $100 a page, $110 a page, 120 maybe, something along those lines for an experienced one. And at that point, trust is everything. And so I will stress that writers, make sure you find artists you trust. If you're an artist, God, be responsible. Your people are giving their livelihoods to your, life savings to you sometimes and trusting you. So be reliable.
You're actually probably one of the few people to really open up and express that about the artist. Because usually, when I start talking about the art part, especially for the writer interviews, they just have so glowing recommendations about the artist and the importance of the art. You're actually just opening up and telling something that is, you're right, it's too real and happens all the time. I've known people that it's happened to myself. I have comic book I have friends who are illustrators, and they've have bad stories of working with writers who have turned them off on working with projects and things like that, and mainly because of money. Ultimately, I think contracts solved everything, but I'm not in this side of this industry, so I don't know how organic that would be to just start bringing up contracts in certain levels.
The contracts are nice. The one thing to keep in mind with a contract is that to actually enforce it is also extremely pricey. If you get someone on a contract, the only thing you can do is sue them. The amount of money and time it would take to sue them would almost be equal to the amount of money you lost from them.
That is true
And,
as well.
and that's also assuming the artist has the money to actually pay you to begin with, which if they don't have it at all, then you just waste the money as well to do the suit. And it becomes a very complicated thing. But I will say though, as I've talked about the hard stories, I do want to, like I said, you can shout out the artists that are trustworthy. I mean, like I said, I worked with Frankie Washington, who was fantastic. Joe Wong was fantastic. Brad Shipp, currently absolutely fantastic. But yeah, it's a real thing that unfortunately, I do know, unfortunately, a lot of writers who have lost way too much money as well. And it's becomes a concern for in the world. And I think something that should be talked about more because, and not as a vilifying the artist, because I don't think you ever should. They are hardworking people who probably are working a full-time job and doing the artwork. At the same time, I think there needs to be also an indication that the writer should be owed the same level of trust and responsibility and compassion as you want as the artist for them to treat you with. And I think sometimes it gets uneven in that sense where it's not talked about often enough that those stories do occur and it's not called out.
Fascinating. I'm fascinating. This feels like a true crime podcast now.
No, I mean, I don't want to come off like I'm shitting on artists because I'm
No,
not.
no, no. It's
I'm
cool. It's
not.
cool. I'm not taking that way, but like again, like this is why I like interviewing people because like you just never know how something can be for someone in this type of industry. You think, oh, it's just comics. Writers and artists should just work well together, but no, people have horror stories. And that's why I have this platform, Blerdkast. It's a place for you to express these concerns because somebody who's getting into comics, whether an artist or a writer, and they want to do this for a living, they need to know that crappy people are out there.
And yeah, and I was mentioning earlier, obviously I've been up since about 5:40 in the morning, so I'm a little punchy.
Oh
So,
no, it's
so I
cool. It's
think
cool.
yeah, I do think it's an important thing. But I will also then say when you do get a good writer artist relationship, it is something to also hold on to because those can be rare. So, like I said, Brad Chip is on the second issue on End of the Terminus, and it's a great relationship, and he'll be on the third. So yeah, those should also be talked about too. When it goes well, it is a beautiful combination of art and words, but when it doesn't, obviously, it can be crushing, unfortunately. A little bit of PTSD from that graphic novel, as you probably can tell, that
Yeah.
it's still a very raw memory of how much money was gone from that project.
Hey,
I
I
apologize.
I don't even blame you. Trust me, I will be mad still too if I lost a bunch of money on something I'm really passionate about. I mean, and I have personally, I have. We can trade war stories between photography and creating comics. There's an ugly side to every business, and it needs to be known. Like in my interview last week, he brought up the fact that working with publishers is really tasking and really daunting when it comes to the comic book creation
Oh,
process.
I can share that story as well.
Hey, we got time. We got time. Trust me. I have a section at the end of the podcast that's a soapbox. You can stand on it and you have the floor. But since we are talking about artists, I want to bring it back to a little more positive light. In your opinion, when making comics, what's more important? Is it the writing or is it the illustration? What's more important in comics, the writing or the illustration when it comes to storytelling?
You can't parse the two. For every great writer, there's been a great piece of writing that's been done by poor art, and there's been a great work of art that's been destroyed by crappy writing. And you can't separate the two. A story that's written very well, if it's a novel, sure, it stands on its own. A great piece of writing in a comic book can only be translated through the pictures as well. So the pictures have to live up to the words and the ideas that are on the page. However, if Alex Ross, who I think is one of the most wonderful artists ever was, drew a beautiful comic book, but was written by a hack, you would lose all power to those images because the writing doesn't live up to the images. They have
Mm.
to live in harmony. Ideally, they were in harmony before it was even on the page between the two team members talking to each other about what works and what doesn't work. Neither one can be separated from the other. And like I said, even as I would say as a writer, if my writing doesn't live up to the art, I'm gonna fail the artist, and I think vice versa. And same too with coloring. I mean, if the color is crap, unfortunately, the art will not live up to the cut. The coloring will hurt the art, and vice versa. And the nice thing about comic books is that it's a team. It works beautifully, and when it works beautifully, it's hard to even tell why it worked perfectly sometimes. But when there's an element that failed that team, it is obvious and blaring. I would say it's sort of like lettering. You don't always know when you see a great piece of lettering, but you do notice it when it's bad.
Yeah.
And it can level the comic book just as much as bad art and bad color and bad writing. If there's a weak link in the comic book team, the comic book is gonna fail. Each person has to live up to the other.
That's actually a really fascinating way of putting that. Because again, I ask everybody this question because I think it's such an integral question to the industry in itself. And everyone has like the same opinion, but also varying different opinions about it. Everyone agrees that it's a marriage. That's hands down, but like tit for tat, who's more responsible for what or what makes or break what, you kind of broke it down in a really different way. So that is very fascinating to get your side of the story of it. Tell me about the end of all. What is the story about?
All right. So the end of all Terminus is a sci-fi sci-fi epic, a little bit Star Trek, a little bit Aliens, a little bit Battlestar Galactica. Basically what I did was it takes place in a nondescript amount of years in the future. Could be hundreds of years, thousands of years, doesn't matter. Sometime in the long future. And what happens is the universe is dying. Now, if you're a physicist, an astrophysicist, some thought that there's such thing as that at some point in history of the universe, the molecules, everything will be pulling itself apart through dark energy until there's literally nothing left, and the whole universe basically dies. I can't remember I think they call it the someone in the world on the computer probably will yell at me for saying it wrong. I'm pretty much I think it's called the Great Sleep, I think. And the whole idea is that even energy itself will have pulled apart to such an extent that the entire universe just lays dead. Okay.
Mhm.
The way my comic book works is that the idea is that there's something called the Big Rip, and the Big Rip is literally tearing the universe apart, and it's going to die. So what happens is on the ship called the Terminus, which is the name of the ship, the last 7 species in the universe have boarded the ship, the Terminus, with the idea that they think that the end of the universe, which has boundaries, you can escape the universe and see what's beyond it. So these 7 species who by and large hate each other because they're different in culture and religion and personality, are forced to live to each other, but they think that if they can just make it out of the universe, something great will be beyond it that can allow them to keep surviving. And the story is what happens from the point where they are now in the story, which is already kind of mid journey, to what happens after the end. And you follow these 7 species as they try to live amongst each other, even though none of them necessarily like each other
Mm.
or respect each other in any real way.
Okay. And what was your inspiration behind creating this story?
I must admit, it's one of those things that kind of just popped in my brain. I was working on a previous comic book that had an idea in my head. It was a Western ghost story. And I started writing, I got like 8 or 9 pages in, and it was interesting, but I kind of got lost in it, not knowing exactly where I wanted to go with it. And as I was, I think I was literally taking a shower, this idea popped in my head of the end of the story of the Terminus. And I was like, crap, what would this be? Why does that why does that work? And then I started working backwards, and I started figuring out what the story is and how I got there. And it kind of started springing up. And then the more I wrote it, the more excited I got. So I got rid of the other story and decided to focus my energies on this one. Because once the writing bug hits you on an idea, you should just run with it. And this one started running with it. And like I said, I kind of backtracked from the end of my story and I started figuring out how I got there. And the more I figured it out, the more I got interested in who was part of that story. And the characters have slowly grew their own personalities, their own storylines. And I'm thinking there's some characters I think will catch people's attention and really like get their interest. A few characters I think already have got people's attention, and I'm excited. I'm enjoying the writing of it so far. And Brad Chip has been killing it with the art, making it look sci-fi and weird. And I think people will really. I think a lot of people like the first one, and hopefully the story they like the second one just as much. Hopefully, or better. Let's go with better.
Okay. Okay. How many issues have you planned this story out to be?
More than I should. Uh, so, okay, so long story short, the story is meant to be a longer form story. I can't end it in 4 issues; it wouldn't make any sense. However, if people's by issue 10 or 12 didn't like it, I can wrap it up rather quickly. But I would like to see it hit 20 to 25 issues.
Okay. That's reasonable.
It's definitely idealistic and optimistic, but the story demands that much breadth to tell.
Okay. So what was the writing process like for the end of all? Like, did you, like you just said, you can wrap it up in 12 issues, but you want to see it go out to 25 issues. So, how did you calculate that when you were initially writing the story out before any panels were submitted or anything like that?
So okay, so basically how I worked this one out was, which is a little different than how I worked out ones when I first started writing. So maybe it's a new way I've learned to like organize my things. I decided with writing, once I understood the end of the story, which I can't give away, but it's I think really different and cool. What I thought about was I started writing the species. What would each species be? What would they like? What would make them special? And then decided the next part was how would they react to each other? Which species would get along potentially? Which ones would definitely hate each other? And then from there, I thought to myself, I came out with about 4 or 5 story beats that need to be in the story for it to really hit. Now, the difference is how much things happen in between the story beats and how long will that story kind of like tell itself. But to hit all 5 story beats needs to be about 12 issues.
Okay.
It would be kind of rushed at that point, but it would be there. To tell it properly is probably 20 to 25 to allow the story to breathe a little bit, let the story develop a little bit, let the different plot points evolve into each other a little more naturally. It's probably 20 to 5 issues, but it to hit all the beats would probably be about 12.
When writing out your stories, what is your favorite part of writing your comics?
I created this character called Thraxis. And Thraxis, I think, is my cool character. He's like the badass character, the ass kicker. And I realized I really like writing his character. He's fun character. He's kind of pompous in his own way, but funny in his own way. I like just writing him beating the crap out of things. And it's kind of, I think my most fun is when I write that character, he became the character that is already taking up more oxygen in the story than I thought he would. But
Mm.
I keep bringing back to him and having him do things. And I'm thinking he's just a fun character to write. And I think that one right now, my interest in him right now is driving quite a bit of the story.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. So I want to talk about the Kickstarter in itself. What
Okay.
type of rewards? I know you have it coming out Thursday, but can you talk about some of the rewards or benefits
Yeah.
for backing your book?
Okay, the benefit to back in my book is that you will make me very happy, and I would appreciate that. So that's one benefit that you have the benefit of being a good person in the world, and good things will happen to you. No, the rewards. The digital copy itself is $3 for the PDF. So for $3, you get the second issue PDF. For I think $4, you get the first and second issue PDF. So that's pretty cheap. That's so for everyone can be in everyone's budget. You can get the full issue for $9 for the second issue, and I think both issues for like $12 or $13, something like that. That gets you two issues that are 24 pages each, interior, and that's not bad for 13 bucks in an indie kind of Kickstarter world, I don't think. You can get all six covers for $32, I believe, right now. It's set at $32 for six covers of number two. And they're great covers. As Dennis Valencia did a great one, Brad Shipp did a great one, Dan Price did a great one, Chris Soloff is gonna do a great one from Crit. This guy Raymond Lee is gonna do a kick-ass Star Wars homage for me as well, which is I think a lot of people are gonna like. He does great work. He did one of the covers for the first issue. What's it? $32 for six comic books is pretty nice. You can get there's a mug. You can get a coffee mug with the logo of Terminus on it, which is pretty cool on there as well. You can get a T-shirt that will allow me to know that people are walking around advertising my stuff, which is cool for me, I guess. And then there's going to be there's a couple of other little ones like a producer one that we do everything, and there's a few others. But and oh, there's an indie comic level, digital level, where for $15 you can get 25 indie comic books on PDF.
Hmm.
So for 15 bucks, less than $1 per issue, that thing's like 60 cents per issue, 25 PDFs from other indie comic book creators across the industry.
Good. That's actually kind of cheap from some of the
Yes.
other rewards I've heard. So like that's
Yes.
really good. You got a lot of great things to offer. This is a side note. One thing I kind of want to personally ask, because I grew up reading comics too. Do you prefer physical comics or do you prefer like, or can you deal with just digital only?
Oh, physical. I like the comic books in my hand. When I do my podcast, I gotta buy comic books for the interviews that I prep. And having it in my hand is so much more interesting. Sometimes I gotta do digital because the comics don't get to me fast enough. I don't have access to them. And it's such a slog to just click on that stupid thing. It's comic books are not meant to be clicked. They're meant to be opened and pages are turned and you can stare at them and then you put them in the little bags and you stick them in a long ass box as like an homage to your obsession. That's how they're supposed to live. That's how I'm gonna die.
You know what? I hate to say this. I am old school like you. Books and comic books are meant to be physically held and read and smelt and
Yes.
just taken care of. Like I cannot tell you how many times I have cried seeing because like you, I'm a second generation comic book nerd. I have
Yep.
seen my entire dad's collection get destroyed by careless acts of family. And
Oh
I'm
man.
just like the heart and like seeing a grown man cry over comic books is both sad and pathetic in a way that um I'm not ashamed to admit. Seeing my father cry over ruined comic books changed me and it taught me to like care and you gotta just take care of certain stuff like this.
I, I'm telling you, I remember I had an issue of The Walking Dead. I think it was issue 23 or 24. And as I was reading it, my stinking ass cat jumped on the comic book and scratched the page. I'm not forgiving the cat ever for that. I mean, it's dead, but I still don't forgive it for what it did.
Damn.
And I will always remember that incident, and I will always remember every time. Oh, and I do have the longstanding vendetta against Tape
Oh yeah, yeah.
because when Tape when you don't properly have the tape away from the comic book when you slide it in and it gets stuck to the cover, the amount of horrors I felt from that is unforgivable to tape forever.
I have so many traumatic stories I can tell about that very incident, but I don't think I want to put my personal business out there on the internet. Just know. So I'm an artist, so I used to take the comics and like bend the spines back and like, oh, I want to draw Spider-Man, put like tape tracing paper on top, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Oh
I was
man.
bad at some certain point, and then my dad broke down on his collection. It was bad. All right, so I brought up earlier about publishing comics the indie way or going through a publisher. Obviously, you chose Kickstarter again because Kickstarter just seems to be the platform for anyone who wants to make and publish comics. Uh,
Yeah. So,
everyone seems to swear by it, but go ahead, tell me, go ahead.
all right. So here's the issue with publishers. Okay. I'm a blunt person, so I'm going to be blunt. Unless the publisher has a certain level of clout, let's say better than 1 to 2% of the industry, you are hurting yourself by using an indie publisher. The amount of money you will receive is either zero because they will never claim profit for you, or they will give you a little bit of money and they will take your rights to film or anything else you're gonna do after that. Indie publishers at the very, very indie have very little benefit for you, unless they're paying for the artwork or they're paying you. Now, I work with 123 Go Publishing, who's a very indie publisher. However, she pays for the artist to do my comic book. I get paid to do the comic. That's a indie publisher, and that's why it works great. It works. But if you're the one putting in the money for the artist, you're putting the money for the printing, an indie publisher at that point is only going to hurt you getting profits at that point. I have stories about that as well that have been costly for me that I Sanctus, but I had that hole in there. I sold to a publisher. I'm not gonna say which one because screw them, but they own the rights to the comic book still, which is why I've never finished the graphic novel. I never saw a penny of the comic book, and I never advertised the comic book. It Unless you're being employed by an indie publisher, do it yourself at that level. It's the best way to try to make money back on your comic book. And yes, we all do it for the fun of comic books, but in reality, if you're not making the money to afford the next one, you can't do it. You got to at least make enough money to afford the next comic book. That's my soapbox on indie publishing.
No, I'm so glad you said it. So what is it that you love so much about Kickstarter in particular over working with a publisher?
Control, and I will say, I've been on Indiegogo. I mean, I've seen Indiegogo. I'm not personally on Indiegogo. I've seen Zoop. I've seen a few others. Kickstarter at the moment is what Facebook used to be for social media, the be all and end all.
Mm,
Kickstarter in every real way is the be all and end all of indie comic book publishing right now. It's the most easy to navigate. It has the most already developed fan base that will already have logins to Kickstarter. The hardest thing you're gonna do as a publisher is if the wall between someone getting your comic book is that they have to create an account for a new website to do it, it's over. They're done.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm saying any wall between them and the buying of your book is a percentage of the customers that you could have had gone. And every time there's a wall then between that impulse to see the comic book and wanting to buy it, you lose a certain percentage of that possible customer base. And opening up a brand new account, putting in your credit card, those extra steps are massive walls that are going to shred your potential customer base. So, which is a problem with Zoop, which is there's not enough people who have Zoop for Zoop to give you a lot of money or get a lot of money off Zoop.
Mm.
Kickstarter has that huge fan base. It has that easy to maneuver page. It's very clean looking. It has a reputation of people just knowing Kickstarter. It's virtually like Xerox, where it's almost the name of the thing has become them. Like
Right, right.
Kickstarter is virtually, I'm doing Zoop, can almost say now I'm doing a Kickstarter instead of saying I'm doing a crowdfunder. It's kind of like at that level of prestige. And when it works, that there's that level of people who bought your comic book already. It's not like you got to go to a comic book convention and try to, I was going to say whore your comic book. Let's not say whore. Let's say pitch your comic book to a whole bunch of customers. You already know this many people supported your comic book. The money is there. You've made it. You paid off your bills, hopefully, and you're ready to move on. Kickstarter offers that in a way that indie publishing and very indie publishing and also conventions can't promise.
I'm just gonna ask this, kind of knowing that I feel like you've done this already because of how you said it. But have you gone to a con and hoard your comic out to the crowd?
I've been to many conventions, some good, some bad. Plastic City Comic Con was a fantastic one for me, and that's Massachusetts. I love it. I've been to one in Toronto. I've been to a few in Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Okay, here's the deal. The hardest thing about comic books, one of the hardest things about comic books is sitting at that table and have people not buy anything from you for a while. It doesn't happen, and for every comic book table, unless you're a known name or unless you just have a product apparently well superior to mine, you're gonna go through those windows of dead time. And those dead moments are brutal. It's so crushing because you go at 2 hours maybe and no one bought your comic book. And you're just sitting there and it's that weird, awkward kind of like confidence killing kind of thing. And it's hard to do. A few people I've seen kill it and they stand up in front of their tables and they're shouting their comic, they're waving it around. I'm like, that's not me. I'm at my table. It's hard to do. And the bigger the show, the more you fall through the cracks potentially. If the show's too small, you may not even get a crowd to actually sell anything to. I've actually hosted a few comic book conventions myself where I signed the guests to the convention for people. So I got to go to those conventions as well. And I've been able to just walk around and see what the show's doing. And when it doesn't go well, you're just like, shit, it's hard.
Mm.
People who can do every convention, there are people out there who do the every freaking circuit and they're there all the time, hit every convention in their area. Those people have guts, they have confidence, and they have a drive that's extremely impressive. And I tip my hats to them and go, good job, guys. I don't know if I could do that many shows. I have the audacity to do 1 or 2 shows a year. It's just like, oh, I just can't sit there again and be like, buy my book. I can't do it. Kickstarter is a nice way because it's already sold and it's relatively passive of an action on your part.
I cannot tell you what it's like for just a regular consumer like me going to that artist alley, walking down, just wanting to look at everyone's books and everyone's artwork, and it literally feels like the red light district of the con sometimes. I hate to put it like that, but
Well, it is. It's kind of and I'm on the other side. And usually, when I go to a comic book convention, I make a deal with myself. I will buy one indie comic book at that convention. I'll find one table that's totally indie, and I'll buy one book from somebody just to pass it along. However, it is like walking past a series of homeless people where they're all staring at you with this longing for you to give them money, and you can't afford to because you only have so much on you. So you kind of don't want to make eye contact. At the same time, you don't be rude and ignore them completely, but
right,
you don't fall into a conversation because now you're going to feel like you have to buy or give money, and so it's a very awkward situation, and that's why I try not to be the guy in front of my table and like buy my book. I am at my table, but yeah, I know what it's like on the other side, and I know what it's like on my side, and not one of those situations is it all that comfortable.
right. Because I've been turned off by the over aggressive people standing on their tables and just buy my book, and
All right.
I've also been turned off by the people who sit there and who look like they don't care that you want to look at their work or whatever, or you can tell that they've been there all day, they've had a long day, and they're just tired, their voices hurting, and I get it, like it just feels like if I'm a mark, I have money, and if I go spend money at this table, everybody else on the alley is looking where the money's being spent, and they're there all day. I'm just there for 20-30 minutes just trying to look around. So they're like, oh, this person, there go this person making another. It gets really kind of,
It's weird. It's like being on 30 or 40 blind dates in a very
yes.
spare time where you're at the table and the person at the table who's like behind the table kind of feels like, do you want to talk to them? Do you want to let them just sit for a little while? Should you approach with like a, like a pickup line, like, hey, nice Spider-Man shirt you got there. Like it's this weird like date thing, or you're just kind of like this awkwardness that never quite goes away because you're always like, hey, cool, nice shirt, blah, blah, blah. Yep, yep, yep. So my book's like right there. Right there. Let's do this. He's like, no, no, no. I pass. It's like my book. It's like being on these blind dates where it's like this weird relationship thing is you're trying to get ahead in it, but it's like awkward as hell.
Yeah.
That might be a weird analogy, but I just popped in my head that's kind of what it's like, where because it's like this weird, awkward. It's like instead of a pickup line, it's like, hey, I see that you had that poster of Batman. That's pretty cool. My comic book's a little bit like Batman. Oh, really? That kind of bullshit thing you try
Right. Yeah.
to.
Oh my God. I can only imagine. It's like a bunch of introverted nerds trying to sell water to a bunch of introverted nerds. We know you want this stuff, but you just got to find the right way to get in to make it feel natural.
I don't know how many times a comic book of mine has been like, oh, you like superheroes? My comic book is like superheroes, really? And then it's like, oh, you like horror? That same comic book is actually horror. Oh, you don't like horror? Don't worry about it. There's no horror actually, and it's more of a comedy. It's just like
just whatever you gotta do to get eyes on your book so they can just judge it for themselves once it's in front of you. I get that. It's a business tactic. I understand.
Well, what I think they should just do to make the life simpler. I think this is a lot simpler. Okay. So you get the door, you get the line started. Every couple of feet is a comic book that's there for you to open. If you want it, you stick the money in the slot and you pick it. If you don't, you go to the next slot. And you just keep the line going around. And so everyone has a chance to look at everyone's comic book, drop their slot and walk away. No one has to talk to anybody and no one feels awkward. That's probably the only way this works in a way that's functional without making everyone weirded out. So just be like, walk in and be like, hey, there's a comic book sitting on that podium. Look at it. If you like it, put money in the slot. The comic book releases, you take it, you walk away. You go to the next one, right? And I think everyone would be happy with that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That might be the move, actually.
It'd be like factory conventions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but then that will take the personality out of the whole experience too. So there's that.
True, but at least you won't feel awkward anymore.
True, that is true. Now, don't get me wrong. I have met some very phenomenal artists and writers who are out there selling their books. I go to my local cons anticipating, looking forward to supporting these particular artists that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. So for anyone out there who is a bit apprehensive about going out to a large con and being in public and like looking for good indie comic book artists to support, looking at a bunch of Kickstarters and just be researching indie comic book artists and seeing who's making an appearance at whatever local con you're going to could be big for you. Just that little bit of advice alone, just pre-research, know who you're going to go spend your money on. Go straight to them. Don't look at nobody else.
Just have like blinders on to keep on.
Right. No distractions. There's a bunch of pretty colors everywhere around you at these cons. Stay focused. Know who you're going to spend your money on. And that goes for vendors too. Every vendor, artist, comic book artist, anybody. Do your research.
Maybe there needs to be some serious like convention etiquette profiles that you can hand to people, like little portfolios you hand to people. I find like everyone has their own like unusual etiquette. Like some people don't want you to like say anything to them when they're looking at the book. They just want dead silence until they're interested and they show it to you. Some people will get angry if you don't greet them immediately. Some people will get angry if you talk about the book before they're done looking at it. Some people get angry if you don't say anything while they're looking at the book. Everyone is, and I kind of find it funny that everyone is so specific about what they expect. And you can never know what that is, but everyone expects you to know what it is when it's their turn at the table.
Everybody wants you to anticipate their specific needs every time. Oh my God, I just had a flashback about work and why I hate it. All right. Oh my God. So, but we are at the end of the interview. I want to just ask, what else do we need to know about Jeff before we go?
April 4th, 8:00. Please back my comic book. I could use all the help I can get. I appreciate it. I will appreciate it and give you a thumbs up when you do it. Look up my podcast, Traversing the Stars. Every twice a week is a new episode, usually on Mondays and Fridays or Saturdays. Like and subscribe. Big shows coming up, big guests coming up in April. So someone for everyone. I think you guys will be impressed. And that's me.
Okay. I'm not going to ask that question about what your goal amount for this Kickstarter will be. I'll let that be a surprise for this Thursday. But I do want to ask, given your success of issue number one, do you think issue number two will make its goal?
I'm a huge pessimist, so I'm hard. I never want to jinx myself and say things. I hope it does.
Okay.
Believe in the comic book. I think it's a good one. It's going to be a lot depend on how many eyes can I get on the book and what's the nature of Kickstarter, which is sort of like a living creature at any given time. Is it hungry or full? And where do they have enough room for mine? I hope they do because I believe in it. I think it's a great comic book. I think it's something a little smarter than is often on Kickstarter, which, I mean, there's no boobs and massive gratuitous gore in it. So I know that hurts it, but it's smart, it's thought provoking, and it's trying to do something a little bit different than that's in a lot of books out right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Just one more time, where can my audience find you out on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at jhaasinterviews.com. You can find me at Twitter on Traversing the Stars. You can find me on Facebook under Jeff Haas. You can find me on Facebook under Traversing the Stars. You can find me on Instagram under J Haas Interviews. You can find me on Instagram under Vector Comics. Sorry, Vector Comics. You can find me on Instagram under Traversing the Stars. You can find me on Blue Sky under Traversing the Stars. You can find me on TikTok under Traversing the Stars, and you can find me on YouTube under Traversing the Stars.
Great, 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 great. Is there I'll give you like a minute soapbox. Is there anything else you want to tell my audience about this grueling life of creating comics?
Okay, let me say this. There's a lot of fun elements of comic book making out there, so I don't want to shit on it completely. Steel yourself going in. Make sure you're not spending more than you can afford to spend out there. Don't bankrupt yourself trying to do it, and try to remember during all the dark times that you'll get that the moment you get to sell your next comic book will make it all worth it. Shitty times and I think that's the thing about comic books, writers and fans and publishers. We have short-term memories. We'll have that horrible period of doubt, but the moment you sell something, you totally forget about all the doubt and all the darkness you had, and suddenly it's the most wonderful thing in the world for a certain amount of time. Then you kind of fall back into the doubt again, but try to hold on to the good moments as long as you can. Ignore the doubts as much as you can. Just be smart with your money, and keep in mind, don't bankrupt yourself. Do what you need to do to keep selling it. So that's my best advice to give you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But for everybody else, this has been Blerdcast. Thank you guys for listening. You can listen to Blerdcast everywhere you listen to your podcast, including Spotify, Anchor. Oh, hold on. Anchor's not a thing no more. Let me fix that. You can listen to Blerdcast on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Kindle Music, and Google Podcasts, and everywhere else you listen to your podcast. And you can follow Blerdography on Facebook, Twitter, now X, Instagram, TikTok. Trust me, I'm live on TikTok and on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Blerdcast. Join us next week where we talk about the MCU problem. That's going to be a good one. So thank you, Jeff, for coming on. I talk to you like at least twice or three times a month. So I cannot wait for your next interviewee. I'm going to have that ready and I'm going to be on time and make sure it's a good interview. So thank you for just being on.
No worries.